The Galactic Confederation ship emerged from the darkness of space, its sleek form reflecting the light of Earth's sun. Inside the main command center, Ambassador Zixtal nervously adjusted his breathing apparatus. After 50 years of diplomatic service, this was his most important mission yet. First contact with the mysterious species from the third planet of this solar system. "Remember the protocols," he told his team of 6 diplomats. "These humans come from a Class 3 planet at minimum. They may be stronger than they appear." His second-in-command, Science Officer Vrelna, reviewed her datapad. "Our scans confirm it's much worse than initially thought. This planet has severe weather patterns, active volcanoes, and large predatory animals. The gravity is nearly twice what we're accustomed to." "Then we proceed with extra caution," Zixtal said. He had overseen first contact with 12 different species across the galaxy. All had gone smoothly. There was no reason to think this one would be different. They were wrong. The human space station appeared small and fragile against the vastness of space. Zixtal felt his heart's race as their shuttle approached. The structure looked primitive, with exposed metal and solar panels that seemed barely adequate for power generation. "Are we sure this is safe?" asked cultural specialist Miplo, peering through the viewport. "Their station appears to be held together with, is that primitive welding?" "They've only had space travel for less than a century," Vrelna reminded them. "We must adjust our expectations." The shuttle docked with a concerning thud. The airlock cycled open, and the alien diplomats stepped cautiously into the International Space Station. 2 humans waited to greet them. They wore blue uniforms with patches showing Earth and various symbols. "Welcome to Earth's International Space Station," said the taller human, a male with short brown hair and a friendly smile. "I'm Commander Frank Miller, and this is Lieutenant Susan Grant. We're honored to be the first to welcome you officially to our solar system." The universal translator converted his words perfectly, but Zixtal was distracted by how casually the humans stood in the station corridor. They weren't using any support systems despite the artificial gravity. "We are pleased to meet you," Zixtal replied formally. "I am Ambassador Zixtal of the Galactic Confederation. We bring greetings from the 5,000 member species of our alliance." Frank's eyes widened. 5,000 species, that's amazing. "We've been wondering if we were alone in the universe for so long." "You are far from alone," Zixtal assured him. "And now that we've found you, we would like to establish diplomatic relations and eventually welcome Earth into the Confederation." Susan spoke up. "We've prepared a tour of the station before we discuss the formalities. Would you like to see how we live in space?" The aliens agreed, and Frank led them through a narrow passageway. The station seemed cramped by Confederation standards. The air recycling system made loud noises and exposed wires ran along some walls. "This section was built 20 years ago," Frank explained. "We add new modules as needed. It's not fancy, but it works." Vrelna's antennae twitched as she took atmospheric readings. "Your oxygen levels are fluctuating by 0.3%. Is there a problem with life support?" Susan laughed. "That's normal. The system adjusts throughout the day. Nothing to worry about." "Nothing to worry about?" Zixtal exchanged glances with his team. On Confederation ships, even a 0.1% oxygen fluctuation would trigger immediate emergency protocols. They continued. To the observation deck, a room with large windows facing Earth. The view was breathtaking. Blue oceans, swirling white clouds, and green-brown landmasses. "It looks peaceful from up here," Frank said. "Hard to believe there's hurricanes, earthquakes, and all sorts of chaos happening down there all the time." "You experience regular natural disasters?" Miplo asked, horrified. "Oh, sure," Susan replied casually. "I'm from California. We get earthquakes. All the time. My house shook so hard last year that all my dishes broke. Just part of living there." Before the aliens could process this alarming information, a loud alarm began blaring. Red lights flashed in the corridor. "What's happening?" Zixtal demanded, his translator barely audible over the noise. The humans checked a nearby console. Their relaxed demeanor didn't change. "Minor pressure drop in Module C," Frank explained, tapping some controls. Happens sometimes. Probably just a seal that needs replacing. The alien diplomats had already activated their emergency breathing apparatus and were clutching each other in panic. A seal? Zixtal gasped through his mask. You have a leak? In space? Susan nodded, still unconcerned. The station gets hit by micrometeoroids occasionally. Creates tiny punctures, we patch them up. You live with holes in your space station? Vrelna's voice had risen several octaves. Not for long, Frank assured them. Our maintenance crew is already on it, see? The alarm stopped. Indeed, the flashing lights and noise had ceased. The humans acted as if nothing unusual had happened, but the alien diplomats remained frozen in horror. Perhaps we should continue the tour, Susan suggested. The hydroponics bay is really interesting. We grow our own vegetables. One moment, Zixtal said, trying to calm his racing hearts. Your station was damaged, losing pressure, and you consider this normal? Frank shrugged. It's space. Things go wrong sometimes. That's why we train for emergencies. But you could have died, Mipolo pointed out. Well, we had a few minutes before it would get dangerous, Susan explained. And we always have emergency procedures. It's really not a big deal. Not a big deal? The phrase echoed in Zixtal's mind. These humans lived on a planet with crushing gravity, extreme weather, predators, and natural disasters. And now they floated in the vacuum of space, in a station that occasionally developed holes, treating potential death as not a big deal. Ambassador, Vrelna whispered, I believe we should update our classification of this planet. Zixtal nodded slowly. Agreed. Earth is clearly a Class 5 death world, and its inhabitants have evolved a concerning lack of danger awareness. Should we abort the mission? Asked Miplo. The ambassador considered this as he watched Frank and Susan chatting casually near the leaking module, discussing repair methods like they were talking about the weather. No, he decided. The Confederation needs to understand these humans better. They could be valuable allies or terrifying enemies. He approached Frank again, removing his breathing apparatus with reluctance. Commander, I believe we should discuss those diplomatic relations now. The Confederation is very interested in learning more about humanity. Frank smiled. Great. We have so many questions too. Let's head to the conference room. Fair warning though, the coffee machine is broken, so we only have the really strong stuff that keeps the night shift awake for 12 hours. As they followed, the humans, Zixtal made a mental note to include in his report that these Deathworlders not only survived dangerous conditions, they seemed completely unaware that they were in danger at all. That made them either the bravest or the most terrifying species in the galaxy. 6 months had passed since first contact. The Galactic Confederation and Earth had established regular communication and exchange of information. The more the aliens learned about humans, the more concerned they became. Humans had survived countless wars, plagues, and natural disasters. They lived in deserts, frozen wastelands, and even underwater in special habitats. They kept dangerous animals as pets and jumped out of flying vehicles for fun. The Confederation Council decided they needed to understand these Deathworlders better. An exchange program was proposed. 5 human officers would serve on Confederation ships while 5 alien officers would join human crews. Captain Olivia Sanchez stood in the docking bay of the Earth Alliance ship Horizon, watching as the shuttle from the Confederation vessel arrived. At 45 years old, Olivia had spent most of her life in space. She had fought in the Mars Rebellion and survived the Europa mining disaster. The Alliance considered her one of their best officers, which was why she had been chosen for this historic program. The shuttle door opened, and her new crew member emerged. Lirvan was an Arcturian, with 4 long arms, pale blue skin, and large compound eyes. He moved carefully in the Earth-standard gravity, his exoskeleton making soft, clicking sounds. Welcome aboard the Horizon, Olivia said, extending her hand before remembering that Arcturians did not shake hands. She quickly lowered it. Thank you, Captain, Lirvan replied through his translator device. I am honored to be the first Arcturian to serve on a human vessel. We're glad to have you. Your engineering expertise will be valuable to us, Olivia said. Let me show you to your quarters. We've adjusted the gravity and temperature in your room to Arcturian standards. As they walked through the ship, Lirvan noticed that the corridors were narrower than on Confederation vessels. The walls were thicker, with visible reinforcement. Emergency equipment was stored every 10 meters. Your ship seems very sturdy, he commented. Olivia nodded. The Horizon is a patrol vessel. We operate in the outer colonies where pirate attacks sometimes happen. She's built to take damage and keep going. You expect to be attacked? Lirvan asked, his voice rising slightly. We prepare for every possibility, Olivia explained. Better to have protection and not need it than need it and not have it. They reached Lirvan's quarters. The room was small but comfortable, with the gravity reduced to 0.7 Earth standard and the temperature raised to a warm 30 degrees Celsius. Get settled in, Olivia said. Tomorrow we begin our training exercises. Nothing builds camaraderie like shared challenge. That night, Lirvan studied human training protocols on his datapad. The Confederation used advanced virtual reality for hazard training. Surely humans had similar technology. The next morning, Lirvan met the rest of the crew in the mess hall. There were 50 humans on board, all wearing the blue uniforms of the Earth Alliance. They greeted him with curious looks but were friendly. This is Lieutenant Joe Ramirez, our security chief. Olivia introduced a tall man with dark hair and a scar across his chin. Nice to meet you, Joe said. Looking forward to seeing how Arcturians handle stress situations. And this is Communications Officer Maria Bell, Olivia continued, pointing to a woman with curly red hair. Maria smiled and nodded. Medical Officer Diane Wells, Olivia said, introducing a serious-looking woman with short blonde hair. And Ensign Paul Johnson, Navigation. Paul was younger than the others with an eager expression. Together we'll be participating in today's exercise, Olivia explained. I hope you're ready for some excitement, Lirvan. What kind of exercise will we be doing? Lirvan asked, trying to sound enthusiastic. Will we use your simulation? Chambers? The humans exchanged amused glances. No simulations today, Joe said. We're doing a real drill. Lirvan followed the team to the shuttle bay, growing increasingly nervous. Olivia led them to a small craft designed for planetary landing. Today's drill simulates emergency planetfall on an uncharted world, she announced to the assembled team. We'll be dropping to the surface with minimal supplies. Dropping to an actual planet? Lirvan's voice trembled. Not a simulation? Best way to learn is by doing, Olivia replied with a smile. Don't worry. We've chosen a relatively hospitable moon. Gravity only 1.2 times Earth standard. Breathable atmosphere. Bit hot though, around 40 degrees Celsius. Lirvan's exoskeleton felt suddenly tight. What humans considered relatively hospitable was at the edge of survivable conditions for most Confederation species. The scenario is this, Joe explained, checking his equipment. Our ship has been damaged in an attack. We need to evacuate to the nearest planet and survive until rescue arrives. How long will this exercise last? Lirvan asked, watching as the humans packed small bags with minimal equipment. 48 hours, Olivia replied. Unless we complete the objectives early. And what are the objectives? Command has placed 3 emergency beacons across the region, Joe said. We need to locate them, activate them, and return to the extraction point before time runs out. Maria handed Lirvan a backpack. It contained a water filter, a small knife, some dried food, and a thin blanket. This is all we get? Lirvan asked, horrified. Standard emergency kit, Maria explained. In a real evacuation, you might have even less. The shuttle launched from the horizon, descending toward a small moon orbiting a gas giant. From space, the surface looked barren and hostile, with vast rocky plains and scattered areas of dense vegetation. Landing in 2 minutes, Paul announced, from the pilot's seat. It's going to be rough. The terrain isn't ideal. The shuttle shook violently as it entered the atmosphere. Warning lights flashed on the control panel. Lirvan gripped his seat, certain they were about to crash, but the humans seemed unconcerned. They landed with a hard bump on a rocky plateau. The engines powered down, and Olivia stood up. "Welcome to LV-426, she said. "Everybody out. The shuttle is now off limits. In our scenario, it's been damaged beyond repair." They stepped out onto the surface of the moon. The heat hit Lirvan immediately, making his breathing passages contract. In the distance, steam rose from pools of bubbling mud. Strange cries echoed from the vegetation. "Are there animals here?" he asked nervously. "Local fauna," Diane confirmed. "Nothing too dangerous according to the survey team, similar to Earth reptiles." "We'll split into pairs," Olivia decided. "Cover more ground that way. Maria, you're with Lirvan. Joe with me. Diane and Paul take the eastern sector." "We're separating?" Lirvan could hardly believe what he was hearing. But wouldn't it be safer to stay together? "In some situations, yes," Olivia acknowledged. "But right now we need to find those beacons quickly. Each team has a communicator. Check in every 2 hours." As the other teams departed, Maria adjusted her pack and smiled at Lirvan. He noticed she carried a dangerously large knife on her belt. "Ready for an adventure?" she asked cheerfully. Lirvan looked around at the hostile landscape, feeling the oppressive heat and hearing the strange animal calls in the distance. This was what humans called training. Not a simulation, but actual exposure to dangerous conditions. For the first time, he truly understood why the Confederation had classified Earth as a death world. It wasn't just the planet itself, it was the mindset of its inhabitants. Where other species saw danger, humans saw challenge. Where others sought safety, humans sought experience. "I'm ready," he lied, following Maria down a rocky slope toward the unknown. Lirvan followed Maria down a steep path into a valley filled with strange vegetation. The plants were unlike anything on his homeworld, thick-stalked with broad leaves that seemed to turn away from the sun rather than toward it. The air smelled of sulfur and something sweet that he couldn't identify. "Have you done many of these drills?" Lirvan asked, struggling to keep his footing on the loose rocks. His forearms helped with balance, but the high gravity made his joints ache. "Oh sure, every 6 months, Maria replied, moving easily across the difficult terrain. "Though this one's pretty tame. Last year we did Arctic survival on Europa. Now, that was cold. Lost 2 toes to frostbite." She laughed at the memory while Lirvan stared in horror. "You deliberately expose yourselves to conditions that cause bodily harm? For practice? How else would we know what to do when it happens? For real?" Maria asked, genuinely confused by the question. "Real experience is the best teacher." They reached the bottom of the valley where a small stream flowed through a bed of red stones. Maria knelt and tested the water with a small device from her pack. "Slightly acidic, but safe to drink if we filter it," she reported. "Let's fill our containers." As they collected water, Lirvan noticed movement in the stream. Small fish-like creatures with too many fins darted away from their shadows. "According to the scanner, the first beacon should be about 5 kilometers that way," Maria said, pointing toward a line of hills in the distance. "We should reach it before nightfall if we keep a good pace." They continued through the valley, the vegetation growing thicker as they followed the stream. Strange calls echoed from the canopy above them, clicks, whistles, and occasional screeches that made Lirvan's antennae twitch anxiously. "What makes those sounds?" he asked. "Local wildlife," Maria said casually. "Similar to birds or primates according to the survey team. Nothing to worry about." "Nothing to worry about" seemed to be a common human phrase, Lirvan noted. Yet they were on an alien moon with unknown creatures, armed with only a knife and minimal supplies. After 3 hours of hiking, they stopped to rest and check in with the other teams. Maria activated her communicator. "Team 2 checking in," she reported. "We're on track to reach Beacon 1 by sunset." "Team 1 here," Olivia's voice responded. "We've secured Beacon 2 already. It was closer than expected." "Team 3, Diane's voice came next. "We've run into some difficult terrain. Might take longer to reach Beacon 3 than planned." "Stay safe," Olivia instructed. "Next check-in in 2 hours." As Maria put away the communicator, Lirvan asked, "What happens if a team misses a check-in?" The others go looking for them, she explained. We never leave anyone behind. They continued their journey, climbing higher as the valley gave way to rocky hills. The heat increased as the day progressed, and Lirvan found himself struggling to keep up with Maria's pace. We can rest if you need to, she offered, noticing his fatigue. I'm fine, he insisted, not wanting to appear weak. How much farther? Less than a kilometer now, Maria said, checking her device. But the terrain gets steeper. The hills were, indeed, becoming more challenging with loose rocks and narrow ledges. At one point, they had to climb up a nearly vertical face using only natural handholds in the rock. This is insane, Lirvan muttered as he carefully placed his 4 hands in the crevices. There must be a safer route. Probably, Maria agreed, already several meters above him. But this is faster, and we're racing against the sunset. They reached the top just as the gas giant began to rise on the horizon, casting the landscape in an eerie purple glow. The beacon was visible now, a small metal cylinder on a rocky outcrop. There it is, Maria pointed. Let's go activate it. They approached the beacon, and Maria showed Lirvan how to input the activation code. The device began to pulse with a blue light, sending its signal to orbit. 1 down, Maria said with satisfaction. Now we need to find shelter for the night. Temperatures dropped significantly after dark on this moon. They found a small cave in the hillside and checked it thoroughly for inhabitants before setting up camp. The cave was shallow but offered protection from the wind that had begun to pick up. Maria unpacked her thin blanket and laid it on the rocky floor. Not exactly luxury accommodations, she joked, but it'll do. Lirvan settled down awkwardly, his exoskeleton not designed for lying on hard surfaces. What about predators, he asked. I'll take first watch, Maria assured him, patting the knife at her belt. Sleep for a few hours, then we'll switch. Lirvan doubted he could sleep at all, but exhaustion soon overcame his fear. He drifted off. To the sound of strange calls in the distance, he woke to Maria shaking him urgently. Get up, she whispered. We have company. Outside the cave, the night had fully arrived. 2 moons cast silver light across the landscape. Maria pointed to a group of shapes moving toward their position, large, 6-legged creatures with elongated heads. What are they? Lirvan whispered, his heart's racing. Not sure, Maria replied, drawing her knife, but they're definitely predators judging by those teeth. The creatures moved with a stalking gait, clearly hunting. They had picked up the scent of the intruders and were coming to investigate. What do we do? Lirvan asked, panic rising in his voice. Maria considered their options. The cave is too shallow for proper defense. We need higher ground. She pointed to a rocky ledge above the cave entrance. If we climb up there, we'll have a better position. They might not be able to follow. Climb? In the dark? Lirvan couldn't believe what he was hearing. No choice, Maria said. She grabbed her pack and moved toward the cave entrance. Stay close to me. They slipped out of the cave and began scaling the rock face. The creatures noticed the movement and charged forward, making high-pitched shrieking sounds. Hurry, Maria urged, pulling herself up faster. Lirvan climbed with all 4 arms, terror giving him strength he didn't know he possessed. They reached the ledge just as the first creature leaped at the rock face below them, its claws scrabbling on the stone. Now what? Lirvan gasped, pressing himself against the cliff. Maria reached into her pack and pulled out a small flare. These hunt by scent and sight. Let's give them something else to look at. She struck the flare, which burst into brilliant red light, and threw it far from their position. The creatures immediately turned toward the new stimulus, rushing toward the flare with excited calls. That won't distract them for long, Maria said. We need to move along this ledge until we find a better position or a way up. They worked their way along the narrow shelf of rock, the creatures below eventually returning to circle the base of the cliff. The communicator, Lirvan suggested. Call for help. Maria shook her head. Not yet. This is part of the exercise, dealing with unexpected threats. You mean we're supposed to handle this ourselves? Lirvan couldn't believe what he was hearing. Those creatures could kill us. That's why we need to outsmart them, Maria said calmly. She studied the terrain ahead. Look, there's a path up to the ridge. If we can reach that, we can make our way back to the valley by a different route. As dawn approached, they finally managed to reach higher ground and leave the hunting creatures behind. Exhausted but alive, they stopped to rest on a high plateau. That was... Lirvan struggled to find words. Exciting? Maria suggested with a grin. Terrifying, he corrected. On my world, training exercises never involve actual danger. Maria looked genuinely surprised. Then how do you learn to handle real emergencies? For the first time, Lirvan began to understand the fundamental difference between his species and humans. They didn't just tolerate danger, they embraced it as necessary education. As the sun rose over the alien landscape, he realized he was experiencing what humans called character building, and somehow, against all logic, he was still alive. Morning brought new challenges. Lirvan and Maria made their scheduled check-in with the other teams. Team 2 reporting, Maria said into her communicator. We activated Beacon 1 but had to evade some local wildlife during the night. We're heading toward the extraction point now. Team 1 here, Olivia responded. Good work. We're on our way to the extraction point as well. Team 3, Diane's voice came through with some static. We've activated Beacon 3, but Paul has been injured. Nothing serious, twisted ankle from a fall. We're moving slower than planned. Do you need assistance? Olivia asked. Negative, Diane replied. We can manage. Lirvan stared at the communicator in disbelief. A team member was injured, yet they weren't calling for emergency extraction. What kind of training exercise continued after someone got hurt? Shouldn't we help them? He asked Maria as they packed up their meager supplies. Captain Sanchez will make that call, Maria explained. For now, we stick to the plan. Team 3 says they can manage. They began their journey toward the extraction point, following a ridgeline that offered good visibility of the surrounding terrain. The day grew hotter as they traveled, and Lirvan felt his energy draining despite the water they had collected. How much farther to the extraction point? He asked. Maria checked her device. About 15 kilometers. If we maintain our pace, we should arrive by late afternoon. 15 kilometers across this hostile landscape seemed impossible to Lirvan, but he said nothing. He had begun to understand that humans measured difficulty differently. What seemed extreme to him was merely challenging to them. They descended from the ridge into another valley, this one broader and filled with tall grass-like plants that reached Lirvan's chest. Maria cut a path through with her knife, watching carefully for movement. Stay alert, she warned. This is perfect ambush territory for predators. As if summoned by her words, a low growl came from somewhere in the grass to their right. Maria froze, signaling Lirvan to do the same. Don't move, she whispered. It might not have seen us yet. The growl came again, closer this time. Lirvan could feel his heart's pounding. Maria slowly reached for her knife. The creature burst from the grass with startling speed. A low-slung reptilian predator with 6 powerful legs and a jaw full of serrated teeth. It charged directly at them. Maria pushed Lirvan aside and faced the creature, knife ready. As it leaped, she dodged with surprising agility and slashed at its flank. The creature howled and turned for another attack. Run! Maria shouted to Lirvan. Head for those rocks. About 50 meters ahead, a pile of large boulders offered potential safety. Lirvan hesitated, unwilling to leave Maria behind. Go, she insisted, facing the predator again. I'll be right behind you. Lirvan ran, his 4 legs carrying him, swiftly through the grass. Behind him, he heard the creature's angry cries and Maria's shouts. He reached the rocks and turned to see Maria sprinting toward him, the creature in pursuit. Get up high, she called. Lirvan scrambled up the boulders, his exoskeleton scraping against the stone. Maria followed, climbing with remarkable speed. The predator reached the base of the rocks and circled, unable to climb the steep surface. That was close, Maria said, breathing hard but smiling. Nice specimen, though. Good hunting technique. You're admiring it? Lirvan couldn't believe his ears. It nearly killed us. Just appreciating good evolutionary design, Maria replied. She examined a cut on her arm where the creature's claws had caught her. Just a scratch. I've had worse from my cat. They waited until the predator lost interest and moved away, then carefully descended and continued their journey. Maria applied a small bandage to her arm and acted as if nothing significant had happened. By midday, they had covered half the distance to the extraction point. They stopped to rest in the shade of a large rock formation, drinking sparingly from their water supplies. The other teams should be converging on the extraction point from different directions, Maria said, studying her map. We'll all meet there by the deadline if nothing else delays us. As if on cue, their communicator activated. All teams, this is Captain Sanchez. Olivia's voice came through. Change of plans. Team 3 is moving too slowly with their injured member. We're going to rendezvous at their position and proceed together. Sending coordinates now. Maria checked the new coordinates. They're about 3 kilometers east of our position. We'll need to cross that ridge. They changed direction, heading toward the coordinates. The terrain became increasingly difficult. Loose scree slopes and narrow paths along cliff edges. One wrong step could mean a fall of hundreds of meters. Is this still the safest route? Lirvan asked as they edged along a particularly narrow ledge. It's the fastest, Maria replied. Sometimes speed is more important than safety. Another concept that seemed uniquely human, Lirvan thought. They found Team 3 sheltering in a small canyon. Paul sat on a rock, his right ankle wrapped in a compression bandage. Diane was checking his vital signs while Joe stood guard. Team 2 reporting as ordered, Maria announced as they approached. Olivia nodded in greeting. Good timing. Team 1 arrived about 10 minutes ago. Liravan examined Paul's injury. The human's ankle was swollen to nearly twice its normal size, an angry purple color spreading under the skin. Can you walk at all? He asked. Paul grimaced. Sort of. It hurts like hell, but I can hobble along with help. We need to move, Olivia said. We're still 7 kilometers from the extraction point, and we have less than 6 hours before the deadline. With Paul injured, we'll move much slower, Lirvan pointed out. Shouldn't we call for emergency extraction? The humans exchanged glances. That would mean failing the exercise, Joe explained. But he's injured, Lirvan protested. It's a sprained ankle, not a severed limb, Diane said matter-of-factly. He'll recover. We'll take turns helping him, Olivia decided. 2 people supporting him at a time, rotating when they get tired. Lirvan couldn't believe what he was hearing. They were going to carry an injured man 7 kilometers over rough terrain rather than admit defeat in a training exercise. I'll take first shift, Joe volunteered, helping Paul to his feet. Maria stepped up to support Paul's other side. They set off at a slow pace, Paul wincing with each step despite the support. After about a kilometer, Olivia and Diane took over. Then Lirvan was called to help. His forearms made supporting Paul easier, and the human thanked him gratefully. Sorry to be a burden, Paul said as they struggled up a slope. This is madness, Lirvan replied. On my world, we would have aborted the exercise immediately after your injury. Paul looked surprised. But then how would we learn to handle injured team members in real emergencies? There it was again, the fundamental difference in philosophy. Humans deliberately endured hardship to prepare for worse hardship. As they crested a hill, they saw a vast ravine blocking their path to the extraction point. A makeshift rope bridge stretched across the gap, clearly part of the exercise scenario. You can't be serious, Lirvan said, looking at the flimsy structure. We're not crossing that with an injured person. It's the only way across, Olivia stated. The extraction point is directly on the other side. We test the bridge first, then cross one at a time. Paul goes with support. They approached the bridge cautiously. Joe tested the ropes, declaring them sound enough for crossing. I'll go first, Olivia said. Then we'll send Paul with Lirvan's help. His forearms will provide the best stability. Lirvan wanted to protest but saw the determination in the human's eyes. This wasn't just stubbornness, it was their way of life. They faced danger head-on, believing it made them stronger. As Olivia stepped onto the bridge, Lirvan wondered what other challenges awaited them before this training exercise was complete. but for the first time, he felt something beyond fear, a growing respect for these strange Deathworlders who refuse to let danger define their limitations. Olivia tested the rope bridge, moving carefully across its swaying surface. The ravine below was at least 30 meters deep, with jagged rocks at the bottom. She reached the other side and gave a thumbs-up signal. "Bridge is stable enough," she called back. "Send Paul and Liravan next." Liravan felt his internal organs shift with anxiety. "This is beyond reasonable risk," he muttered as he helped Paul toward the bridge. "Trust the ropes," Paul said, grimacing through his pain. "They're designed to hold much more weight than ours." They stepped onto the bridge together, Liravan using his forearms to steady both himself and Paul. The structure swayed alarmingly with each step. The ropes creaked under their weight. "Slow and steady," Liravan said, trying to project confidence he didn't feel. "We're making good progress." They were halfway across when Liravan heard a sound that made his blood freeze, the distinctive snap of fibers breaking. One of the support ropes was beginning to fray. "We need to move faster," he urgently told Paul. Paul nodded, understanding the situation immediately. They increased their pace despite the pain it caused him. The bridge swayed more violently with their faster movement. Another snap, louder this time. The entire bridge lurched to one side. "Run!" Paul shouted. They abandoned caution and rushed forward as best they could. Behind them, the ropes continued to break. They were just meters from safety when the bridge gave way beneath them. Liravan reacted instinctively. Two of his arms grabbed Paul while his other two shot out to grasp the edge of the ravine. They hung precariously, Paul dangling from Liravan's grip over the deadly drop. "Hold on!" Olivia shouted, rushing to the edge. She and Maria reached down, grabbing Paul's arms and pulling him up to safety. Liravan scrambled up after them, his exoskeleton scraping painfully against the rocks. Once on solid ground, he collapsed, his forelimbs trembling with exertion and fear. "That was close," Joe said, watching the bridge's remains settle at the bottom of the ravine. Liravan expected panic, anger, perhaps even an emergency call for extraction now that their crossing path was destroyed. Instead, he saw the humans calmly assessing the situation. "Good reflexes," Olivia told Liravan. "You saved Paul's life." "I just reacted," Liravan said, still shaking. "That's what training is for," Diane pointed out. "So your reactions become automatic in emergencies." Paul, despite his painful ankle and near-death experience, managed to smile. "Thanks, Liravan, I owe you one." "What about the others?" Liravan asked, looking back across the ravine where Maria and Joe remained stranded. "We'll find another way across," Maria called. "There's a narrower point about a kilometer north. We can probably jump that section." "Jump it?" Liravan couldn't believe his ears. "We'll rendezvous at the extraction point," Olivia decided. "You two be careful." Maria and Joe waved acknowledgement and disappeared back into the vegetation. "Now we continue," Olivia said, helping Paul to his feet. "But the bridge collapsed," Liravan protested. "Someone could have died." "But no one did," Olivia replied calmly. "Thanks to quick thinking and teamwork. That's a successful outcome." They continued toward the extraction point with Liravan and Olivia supporting Paul between them. The terrain became easier, a gradual downhill slope through sparser vegetation. In the distance, Liravan could see a flat clearing that must be their destination. "We're almost there," Diane said encouragingly. As they approached the clearing, Liravan noticed something unexpected. A small shuttle had landed there. Beside it stood several tall figures in the distinctive uniforms of Confederation officers. "Who are they?" he asked. Olivia smiled. "Observers. The Confederation requested permission to monitor our training exercises as part of the exchange program evaluation." The alien observers rushed forward as they entered the clearing, medical drones hovering around them. "This exercise must end immediately," declared the senior officer, an admiral named Kuznak from the Rigelian sector. "We have recorded multiple safety violations and life-threatening scenarios." The admiral's mandibles clicked in distress as he surveyed the humans' conditions: Paul's swollen ankle, Maria's cut arm, various scratches and bruises on all of them. You allowed a crew member to become injured and then continued the exercise, Kuznak said accusingly to Olivia. You crossed a dangerous ravine on an unstable bridge. You encountered predatory wildlife without proper weapons. This was meant to be a training simulation, not an actual survival situation. Olivia looked genuinely confused. With respect, Admiral, how can it be a proper training exercise if there's no real challenge or risk? The purpose of training is to prepare while minimizing danger, Kuznak insisted. No, Olivia replied firmly. The purpose of training is to be ready for actual danger when it occurs, and the only way to do that is to experience it in controlled conditions. As if on cue, Maria and Joe emerged from the vegetation on the far side of the clearing. They were wet, covered in mud, but unharmed. Found a spot to cross, Maria reported casually. Had to swim part of it. Current was stronger than expected. The Confederation observers stared in horror. You swam through unknown waters? With potential predators? Joe shrugged. Seemed like the fastest option. Admiral Kuznak turned to Liravan. You've experienced this methodology firsthand. What is your assessment? Liravan considered the question carefully. 2 days ago, he would have agreed completely with the Admiral's horror. Now, he wasn't so sure. Their methods are extreme by Confederation standards, he admitted. But effective. When the bridge collapsed, I didn't freeze or panic. I acted. When we encountered predators, we worked together to overcome the threat. The humans call it muscle memory, training your body and mind to respond correctly under pressure. But the risks, Kuznak protested, are calculated, Liravan finished. The humans understand the dangers better than we do because they don't just study them, they experience them. Later, aboard the Confederation flagship in orbit, the alien Admiralty reviewed the exercise footage. They watched as humans carried their injured comrade rather than abandoning him. They saw Liravan save Paul from falling. They observed the team adapting to each new challenge without hesitation. They deliberately placed themselves in danger, to practice being in danger, one admiral observed, and they helped their injured. Without hesitation, another noted. No one was left behind. This explains how they've survived on their death world, Admiral Kuznak concluded. They don't avoid danger, they prepare for it. They don't flee from it, they face it together. The final report to the Confederation Council included a new recommendation. In any future conflict, avoid provoking humans at all costs. Not because they were dangerous adversaries, though they certainly were, but because any species that treated survival training as a team-building exercise had a perspective on danger that the rest of the galaxy simply couldn't comprehend. Back on the Earth, Alliance ship Horizon, Liravan sat in the mess hall with his human colleagues. They all bore bandages and bruises from the exercise, yet they spoke of it with pride and even humor. Next time we should try the volcanic region, Joe suggested, earning groans and laughs. What did you think of your first human training drill? Olivia asked Liravan. He considered his answer carefully. I think I understand now why Earth is classified as a death world. Not because of its environment, but because of you. Your species doesn't just survive danger, you seek it out. You use it as a teacher. That's an interesting perspective, Diane said. We just call it being prepared. In the Confederation, we try to avoid danger, Liravan explained. Humans seem to embrace it. Not embrace, Paul corrected, his injured leg propped up on a chair. Respect. We respect danger enough to understand it. And understanding something is the first step to overcoming it. Liravan looked around at these strange creatures, so fragile compared to his armored exoskeleton, yet so much more resilient, in spirit. He realized the true lesson of the exercise. It wasn't that humans didn't comprehend danger, it was that they refused to be limited by it.